It's been amazing 2 days, and you're going to hear a lot and see a lot about what has happened. And it's been an amazing ride, and I think I'm just overwhelmed by the energy and the commitment and the inquiring minds and the desire for just having a national conversation, which is really what these people have been doing today. And before sort of getting into any more detail, I wanted to really recognise Paul Goldsmith. He's been someone that this discussion could not have happened anywhere else. It had to be Parliament, and we had to have a place for 2 days. And if you know anything about Parliament, that is extremely difficult. But that was able to be achieved, and I'd just like Paul to come up and put our hands together to recognise Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and it has been distinguished guests, participants, members of Parliament. It's been a great thrill for me to be a small part of this exercise as one of the more liberal and open-minded MPs that we have here in this Parliament. And it's good to see that the country's in such good shape, considering the brain power that we've had on tap as exercised over the last couple of days. I don't know the precise outcome of what we're going to see in the next few minutes. I know that there's been tears and there has been passion, and to entrench or not to entrench all these issues that have been grappling with over the last couple of days. And who knows what the outcome will be, in the sense that it may ultimately move the government. It may move the Constitutional Advisory Panel. Who knows what impact or what we have here today will have. But I do know that the friendships that have been created amongst the group that have been working, 50 or so students and younger people, will be enduring. And it's also given this group a wonderful insight into the complexities of government and the Constitution and the issues facing New Zealand over the next 50 years or our lifetimes. And I'm sure that they'll go away thinking anew about the role of New Zealand. It always seems to me that you can measure your success in life, I suppose, in 3 areas. We obviously want to be successful in our personal life and our relationships, and as a mother or a father or a son or a daughter, and that's an important part of life. And then we also concentrate on our professional lives, and we all want to be successful in what we do as a lawyer or a historian or a politician or whatever you choose to have as your life. But it seems to me that it's also important for everybody to think of something beyond themselves and to think about the society that they live in and the country that they live in. And I just hope that after these couple of days that the people involved in this will be more civic-minded, I suppose, and sometime over their lives will have an opportunity to contribute to society and the issues that we grapple with as a country. And who knows, some will end up in this institution and some will end up in other places contributing to New Zealand's future all around the world. And so very happy to be part of this process and really looking forward to what the outcome is. And congratulations to Wendy McGuinness and the McGuinness Institute for holding this, and for all of the many people who have been involved in this process. And all the best, and looking forward to the outcome. Thank you.
Well, he's not the only one that's looking forward to the outcome. I don't know very much about it at all, so it's been an interesting time. What I wanted to do was sort of, thanks Paul, because really setting that context was actually really important. I wanted to say, who would try and write a constitution in 2 days, and why would you try and do it? Okay, why? It's kind of like, it's almost like we've considered it as too difficult, and it's about trying to be too politically correct, and we've sort of put this kind of really important frame, this important heart of, if you like, the body of New Zealand, and we've put it in glass, and we're just too scared to touch it. And what I've seen today and yesterday is that these people get it. They get it, that it's important. They wanted to be here. Can you imagine, and I mean, I'm a mother of teenagers, if you had to expect 50 young people to turn up on the day, they had to come around the country, how many, I was expecting to lose a couple, to be honest. 50 turned up. Not only that, the 50 have stayed right through for the full 2 days. I mean, I've been watching that door to make sure that no one escaped, so I know. And so that's the level of commitment. And if you see these pictures and the work that they have done, you will really understand that, they never let go. I mean, I expected them at some stages just to kind of give up, and they didn't. And in fact, I challenged them this morning because I thought, how on earth, we set up a set of exercises, and we didn't get to where we wanted to yesterday evening. And so we knew coming into the morning that there was no way that we could get a lot of discussion around consensus of the parts. So, to be honest, I didn't sleep well on that, because here we are wanting to put forward a constitution, and we've got 50 people in the room, and we wanted to be able to get everyone to sign off on it. We sort of wanted that, level of process and due diligence so they could all stand proud. But what I realised was that actually wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was when I sort of gave them these two options this morning, and Dean and I were discussing on the phone this morning, going, and I said it didn't matter. I said the concept behind this was that it was an open canvas, and we used the concept of a canvas in what we called a baton. So that was the starting of the process. We put a canvas in a baton, and the concept is that we would pass it to the participants to fill. So this morning, I stood here in front of these groups and I said, it is okay if I have to stand here with a blank canvas and say that it was too hard. Which was kind of a big thing, because if anything about me, I like to tick my boxes. But I would have happily done that, because I knew that the process was really important. It was much more important than the outcome. So what I asked, there was another option. And the option was that they just trusted each other, that they just tried to put the segments together as a result of the discussions they had. They never had an opportunity to see the full document. So can you imagine what level of trust that had to have in it? So it needs to always be considered as an experiment. They cannot, as a result, sign off on it today. They're going to sit here and be watching those parts come together in one system. I mean, that's pretty challenging, and I have to say that they just seem to swallow it up. There was this moment they went back into their groups to discuss which option that they were going to have, and Dean and I were seeing some pretty heavy discussions, and we were going, oh, was that the right thing to do? Maybe we could have, pushed them through the hoop if they, wanted to, But then there was sort of that wonderful moment when Dean came up to me. He said, one group said yes. And then we were looking around, another group said yes. And then we sort of felt there was suddenly that moment when we just went from one group to the next, and everyone said, yes, let's give it a go, we'll do it, we'll get something done. And I think it was just an amazing process from there. The room changed. We had this feeling of, a system, and it was, that lovely, like New York City, where everyone's busy doing stuff, but you don't know what they're doing, and they're sort of banging into each other and things happening. So we had this, and Dean sort of commented that the room changed and the feeling changed, and it was an amazing thing to see. And feel, and it's really that whole bit about a national conversation. So these guys have really given it a go, and it's been really tough. Now, I said I wouldn't talk too long, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass this over. Can I just say one other thing? The birth of EmpowerNZ came from Strategy NZ. And Sir Paul Callaghan was the keynote speaker at Strategy NZ, and he was absolutely and truly inspiring. For those that were there will always be a Sir Paul Callaghan, I think, in their hearts, and he definitely is in mine. Poor chap. But anyway, so my point is that when people let go and actually just express what they feel, it is a really true and meaningful experience. And I would like to say that we had that with Jim McClay, He spoke honestly with enormous integrity in his heart, talked about the constitutional crisis, and I think anyone that heard him, and that's filmed, he also had that ability of just, talking, deep reflection, looking backwards and looking forwards. So it's been an absolute treat, and this is going to be my last word. I want to say, Dean, you have been an amazing lead facilitator. Everyone else has been extraordinary. You have been super, super, super extraordinary. I cannot say how many times I've looked to you and seen you push through and over and under and round obstacles. And at this time, I'm going to officially pass it over to Dean, and you guys are going to see what these guys have put on this canvas. Cheers. Thank you.
Kia ora, Wendy. Ngā mihi nui and greetings to you all. About 47 hours ago, I had to give a pep talk to 50 young people who had assembled at the Gourmet Stay Hotel up near Taranaki Street, and 7 other facilitators, to speak to them and give them a pep talk about the task that lay ahead of them over the coming 2 days. And I just want to pick up on a couple of the points that I made to them. I said to them at the outset, this was an incredibly exciting opportunity because they got to deliberate on the blueprint for organising government and society for their generation. Well, I'm happy to report it's been a truly exciting 2 days, and I think we have succeeded in generating a blueprint, and we're going to have it explained to us and passed on from us in the glass baton later on during this ceremony. I also said it was an ambitious project, what we were trying to achieve in 2 days, because we were indeed starting with the blank canvas. Well, it was a blank canvas until I spilt a lot of coffee over it, but that was partly deliberate to indicate the colours and the hue and the different interests and expectations we might bring to that process. But the important thing was we're inviting the participants to consider matters afresh, to not feel constrained by the current arrangements, and to think boldly about what might be possible. So, was it ambitious? I think it's fair to say that was a little bit of an understatement. I also said to them that I expected it was going to be a lot of mahi, a lot of work. And can I look at the participants and ask them, was it a lot of work? Was it a lot of mahi? Truly was. But then I reassured them. I reassured them that they had the support and the resources, I thought, to be able to help them on that journey and succeed in that project. And I spoke about the facilitators, the 7 facilitators who were going to guide them through the journey and try and bring out the best of them. And they have been utterly fantastic, I'm happy to report back. They really truly brought out the best in our participants throughout the 2 days. I also said there was going to be a lineup of experts, civic leaders and politicians who are going to share their wealth and knowledge and expertise. And they have. It has been awesome. They've really enriched our hui by providing us with wisdom, advice, suggestions, and that's been remarkable. I also said to them there was going to be a design, technical and logistical support that would help through that journey, and that has been awesome and utterly slick. There's been slick support throughout the 2 days. Also said to them that there were going to be some navigation lights, that we were going to guide them through a process, and the process was going to be shaped in terms of a pyramid. And thankfully I have a Panamu version of our pyramid, and these were the steps on that journey and the steps that we're going to invite them to follow through to try and achieve that goal. And there they are, 5 steps, starting at the top with framing the mission, understanding what was the purpose of our constitution and who its audience was. So we deliberated on that, and you'll hear more about that from the participants themselves shortly. We then invited them to express the vision, to reflect on the imagery and the values of the constitution. The 3rd step was identifying the elements, identifying the themes and chapters that were going to form the part of our constitution. And 4thly, and a lot of our time was then going to be spent on shaping those elements, shaping the text and the body of the constitution. And the 5th step is this step, which is showcasing the product, sharing our journey, our constitution, and our lessons to you people that are assembled today. So that's been our process, and that's what's guided us through. And we've managed, by and large, to follow that pretty faithfully. We didn't always get to the end of the right step at the right time of the day, but we evolved and treated it as being organic as well. And I think that's been a helpful set of navigation lights to move us through. And finally, I said it was going to be an experiment, and Wendy was right, it's been an experiment. The participants knew they were going to be guinea pigs, and we would learn a lot both about the process of constitutional change and reform and deliberation. We'd learn more about constitutions themselves, how they worked, and more importantly, we're going to learn something about ourselves. I think it's fair to say, talking to the participants, that they have learned a lot, and they'll be sharing some of that with you later on tonight. But really that's enough from me, because the stars of this show are really the youth participants who have been deliberating on the next 2 days, and in the next 25-30 minutes I'm going to hand over them for them to share with you their journey, the constitution they've developed and the lessons they've learned. So if you have a big round of applause for the participants, showcase their constitution.
Kia ora koutou, ko Ihapera Paniora tōku ingoa. Kia ora, ko Pania tōku ingoa. We thought we would just share a song that we wrote. We thought that we would kind of start off on a fun note, because us participants must not forget that once we peel back the blazers and the shirts, the ties and the skirts, we are just average students, majority of us poor students, and so this is for you guys, and we hope you enjoy. Kia ora. Everyone, put your hands together, everybody. Now, this is a story all about how we turned the Constitution upside down. Now, I'd like to take a minute, just sit right here and tell you how we came to draft this thing right here. Empower New Zealand, drafting the Constitution for the 21st century. In Aotearoa, born and raised, we the youth of today have a lot to say. Chilling and relaxing and acting all cool up in Parliament with our creative tools. Since the Constitution isn't so good, it started making trouble in our neighbourhood. Little crisis. Maclay got scared since our affairs are now all up in the air. Empower New Zealand, drafting a constitution for the 21st century. And that's why we're here. Started from scratch without any fears. If anything, we could say that this was pretty weird. But we thought we're finally here. We're finally here. We're finally here. You guys, we hope you enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you.
Well, that's a pretty comprehensive summary of our process that we've been through in the last 2 days. But as we're scheduled to present this over 7 minutes, I'm going to use the next 5 minutes to give you the expanded version. My role is to enlighten you all on the process we've taken over the last couple of days. We started as a scruffy bunch of 50 strangers, and we'll leave here a bold, focused, united group of Constitution warriors. Nothing great is ever achieved without hard work, passion and dedication. This has been seen from everybody involved in this workshop, including the team at McGuinness, the participants, the speakers, the facilitators and the people who put on the never-ending supply of food. Our first brush with passion and our first chance to come together in these wars as a group was when we gathered here for the profity on Tuesday morning. Being welcomed into this room, goosebumps and all, set the scene for what is a matter of national importance, and that it was more than just a couple of kids throwing around words they'd used at a university. This was a coming together of minds to facilitate building a country that we want to live in. That first morning, we were treated to quality speakers who gave up their time and shared their views on the role of the Constitution. The one that resonated with me the most was Sir Tipene O'Regan, who said, "Democratic is a good adjective, but democracy is a very, very difficult noun." By the end of the speeches, I was even more confused than when they'd begun, because I thought I was here to write a constitution, but I just found out that they could be codified, uncodified, written, entrenched, supreme, they could have principles, or they could be prescriptive. I'm not a law student. BTW. I hoped that there was somebody else in the group with some good ideas, because I had nothing. That afternoon, we worked through achieving under time pressure, we made consensus decisions, and we used the skills of the facilitation provided by Dean and the rest of the team. In one afternoon, we managed to articulate our constitutional purpose, values and elements, working in our small groups first and then workshopping all group ideas as a whole, a process which was in the same measure exhilarating as exhausting. By the end of the day, we had our ideas out in the open, we grabbed more coffee and we headed to dinner, where we were lucky enough to hear John Burrows speak and also engage with special guests at the dinner table, whose brains we could pick about anything that came to mind, which after a 14-hour day and a couple of glasses of wine were pretty interesting. I fell into bed that night. I was inspired by the awesome people I'd met, encouraged by the ideas I had been exposed to, and excited for the possibilities of what we could achieve. Day two saw us jumping straight back into work. We split up into the different sections of the Constitution that we'd identified the night before, and around midday we were lucky enough to have a panel of MPs from the Mana Party, the Māori Party, the National Party, the Green Party and the Labour Party attend and speak to us, and then we shared them around the tables and interrogated them in our groups. For me, this was definitely the highlight. I've got great respect for their willingness to share their knowledge and their time. The following afternoon was the best exhibition of time pressure, passion, consensus, decision-making and excellent event organisation. In around 3.5 hours, we went through the process of writing a constitution, from brainstorming and negotiating with other groups to first and second drafts, weaving all our ideas into a constitution that we all own. Our final product is by no means perfect or legally binding. But it is a statement of what we as an educated, rational, engaged youth are looking for in a country that we want to live in, that we want to raise our families in, and that we want to leave for future generations. I'll now pass you over to those who are going to share the details of our constitution with you.
These values, we agree, shall never be infringed upon by prejudice, fashion, or ideology. Acknowledging our whakapapa, we give life to and endorse this, our Constitution. He tangata, he tangata.
New Zealand's constitutional identity has been evolving for over 100 years, and we couldn't really hope to do justice to it in just 2 days' time. However, the constitution we've created does reflect the issues that we consider to be most fundamental to our nation today and going forward into the 21st century.
And as Stacey explained, each part of the Constitution was created by a different group. Due to the time constraints, it wasn't possible to go through an extensive review process, as we would have liked, or to achieve full consensus on all of these issues. But thanks to the value setting we did yesterday and the trust which we have in each other as a group, the groups were able to sort of forge forward today and reach agreement on their respective parts, which they'll soon present.
Yeah, so the result was a colourful and experimental constitution, and the members of each group will now run through its different main sections.
And obviously one of the first questions you'll confront is, how do you begin a constitution? The Americans do it with we the people. And also, how do you structure that constitution, which Kieran's going to speak to.
Excuse me. Thanks, tech guys. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, my name is Kieran. Any preamble or introduction to our new constitution needs to be compelling and memorable. It should be approachable and accessible at multiple layers. For the 21st century, we want a constitution to be knowable, so that we can believe that in order to achieve this, the expression of its essence, traditionally known as a preamble, we could take a more innovative manifestation. We should have an open mind about how it could be transposed so that it comes alive in an everyday sense. We need the operational aspects, important to lay the framework of how exactly relationships between state and the people will function and how legal matters will resolve. But in order to get the average Kiwi to our island, values need to be readable and comprehended in an inclusive way. Not everyone needs to know the nuts and bolts of how it works, but we all need to be able to relate to it. We live in an increasingly visually literate culture. The true value of design thinking is proven by the fact that we have designers here in a workshop working directly with future policymakers, lawmakers, and if it doesn't all work out, coffee makers. We ask the question that if we are to examine and draft a new constitution for the 21st century, why does it need to be a codex? Why does it need to be typeset in Garamond, a font that was designed 300 years ago? The Constitution's introduction and even introductions to its chapters can be complemented by a visual narrative to provide a transformational experience, one that compellingly narrates the values of kaitiakitanga, fairness, mana, justice and accountability. Currently, citizens in New Zealand are pandered to once every 3 years, and their only civic duty is left to ticking the box. There is no reference to our rights and responsibilities to participate, which is our duty as tangata whenua. We aren't simply consumers, and it's such a reductive term. We long for tangible experiences and engagements. So why couldn't our constitution look like a black box? Maybe that might help. An online digital experience. Yeah, there we go. Sweet. With technological power doubling every 18 months, we have the opportunity now to see the capabilities that interactive web experiences bring. No longer silos of information, they are places to engage and interact with content. Film. We knew that we are now the new masters of film. So moving pictures are memorable, compelling and designable. What if we could have a real, ordinary New Zealanders explaining what the Constitution is to their peers? Or an experiential space. Imagine taking a small child to a place like Te Papa, where a designed experience could teach them about New Zealand's history and its core values as outlined in the new Constitution. Artefacts you could touch, hear, smell, see and sense paint a richer picture than words ever could. The more The more that we invest into visually projecting what New Zealand values outlined in a clearly written constitution as well, we can watch the barriers to constitutional engagement come down. Maybe then we can have transparency and true two-way dialogue between the state and its citizens. Any questions or problems that arise may fall into the category of logistics, but never reasons not to do it. Thank you.
When we began this process, we soon discovered that there were a few issues that were really going to permeate the entire constitution, such as its legal status in relation to other laws and how it's going to be enforced. So Charlotte is now going to take us through our conclusions on those issues.
Kia ora koutou. So I come from the operational elements group, and I know that doesn't sound very sexy, which is probably because it's not, except sort of to the strange tastes of law students who made up pretty much the entirety of our group. But just because something's not sexy doesn't mean that it's not vital. So our stuff basically sets all the boundaries for the framework on which everything else can be built. So we sort of had two purposes, and the first was substantive. So this was to entrench operational and mechanistic elements and prevent unnecessary judicial intervention. Because of that latter point, we didn't include supreme law, which would have allowed the judiciary to declare legislation inconsistent and of no effect, and that would have meant that the judiciary was supreme over Parliament. We decided to stick with parliamentary supremacy because we ultimately felt that a larger, elected, more representative body than the judiciary should be having that say, that final say. So we put in a clause preventing the court from declaring enactments inconsistent with the Constitution as invalid. What we also did is entrench parts 3 and 4 of the Constitution. So that's the operational nature of government and also certain electoral laws. So entrenchment basically means that these provisions can only be changed with a 75% majority in Parliament or a majority referendum to the public. And so the reason why we felt entrenchment was important is it's a signal as to who ought to have power to change the Constitution. So going back to the purpose, the sort of second side of this was engagement, so adopting and reviewing the Constitution. So we decided in terms of adoption that it would have to be first established, the text would be first established by a citizen constitutional assembly, and then that would then be followed by a referendum which would require 60% support of all voters. And pretty much the same thing with the review process, that the Constitutional Assembly and the referendum would have to take place every 20 years to review the Constitution. So that's all the rules of the rules, so I'll leave you to the more sexy stuff. Thank you.
And although it was nice to hear Paul cheering for parliamentary sovereignty, you'll see that when we come to discuss the rights and responsibilities of the state and citizens, we certainly made some erosions to our beloved principle of parliamentary sovereignty. I'll say no more.
Tēnā koutou, I contributed to the rights workstream. We pressed, sometimes banged our heads together to let rights and responsibilities take a part. The values guided us to where we have landed now. Part 2 of the Bill of Rights Act provides the bulk of our human rights. Kaitiakitanga has a place promoting guardianship and sustainability, particularly for our environment. Precious land, unique forest, abundant ocean, clean air, all the life it sustains. An article prescribes undiscriminate rights to housing, education, healthcare and sustenance. It asks that these rights are provided with both fairness and the limitations and liberties given by available resources in mind. Accountability is reached for, with promoting a right to transparency in our government. These rights are all enforced by an independent reporting commission and a provision. If legislation before court is deemed inconsistent with our rights, judiciary can declare unconstitutionality and further debate in Parliament will be mandatory. The embraced values are woven into our rights, which pledge to New Zealand life and environment what is deserved. Kia ora, thank you, power to the Constitution.
No New Zealand constitution would be complete without a consideration of the fundamental issue of state-Māori relations. And so Julia is now going to discuss those issues.
Kia ora koutou. And what can be more sexy than te tiriti o te waitangi? Nothing, I say. In this little room, over the last 1.5 days, it has been accepted that the Treaty of Waitangi must be in any constitution of Aotearoa, New Zealand. The contentious issue was, and still is, and will continue to be, how and to what extent is it included. Our little rōpū concluded that Te Tiriti is the founding document of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, this should not be too controversial. It is in our current cabinet manual. Thank you. But in our constitution, it still stands alone as the separate document outside of any written constitution that may be created, but its presence is inherent. Our group was tasked with defining the relationships between the Crown and Māori in a single chapter, to which we began. This constitution operates to give effect to the principles of Te Tiriti. Now, the focus of our chapter is to ensure that the constitution, and thus all laws of New Zealand, are read in light of the principles, spirit and intention of the Treaty of Waitangi. By doing so, we acknowledge that the treaty is and will continue to be a living document that evolves through time. In order to ensure that the spirits and principles are upheld, we have vested a new role into the Waitangi Tribunal, who has been expanded to act as the mechanism that should make periodic inquiries as to what Indigenous rights flow from Te Tiriti and the laws that develop through New Zealand through time. Claims of constitutional breaches, therefore, to the spirit, principles and rights of Māori can be brought to the Waitangi Tribunals to consider. But unlike the status quo, where a breach is proven, an appropriate remedy will be awarded by the Waitangi Tribunal, not just for consideration, but to be enforced. In the space of 1.5 days, the importance of the Treaty of Waitangi and Māori as tangata te whenua has been acknowledged, but the importance and impact of Crown Māori relations flows through the veins of Aotearoa. When a constitution is eventually created, this should not be lost or just form part of a constitution. It should be in the heart. Kia ora.
I'm sure with plenty of politicians attending tonight, they'll be wondering where amongst rights and responsibilities and Te Tiriti the branches of government sit. So on that note, I welcome Lucky.
Kia ora everyone. Our group had the task of drafting out the chapter containing the different organs of government. Now, we identified 4 key areas within this field that we wanted to see in the Constitution. But however, the most controversial of these issues was whether or not our new Constitution, the one for the 21st century, foresaw a role for the Queen of England as the head of state for our new independent state of New Zealand. Now, after much deliberation, and especially during the rapid fire round with the different MPs, we realised that despite what some may think, that New Zealand would be an insignificant state without the Queen as our head, we see New Zealand as playing a significant role in the Asia-Pacific region, independently of the Queen, and want to embark on a bold new step into the future. We thus declared New Zealand as a republic. a republic with the Tumuaki replacing the Prime Minister. We wanted to highlight that the Constitution of the 21st century seeks transparency in the judiciary and maintains that independence. And to enable this, we proposed the establishment of an independent judicial commission which made recommendations to the Attorney General as to the appointment of judges to the judiciary. We largely kept the executive as is because we liked the idea of having a strong decision maker. But we wanted to highlight the need for ministers to be subject to the values that we've enshrined during the last 2 days and be subject to those values as well. And those were the highlights.
Finally, we have Kirsty, who's going to talk about the part of our Constitution that is inspirationally named the Voice of the People.
In considering the status of the legislature in New Zealand's Constitution, we concluded that the following principles were critical to its operation: democracy, proportionate representation, accountability, transparency, and equal voices in and equal access to the democratic process. We found that New Zealand's current legislature is a fundamentally sound institution. For this reason, we chose to offer only 2 changes to its current operation. Firstly, we have suggested an extension of the current parliamentary term from 3 years to 4 years. This is because, as May Chen has stated, the current term of 3 years is too short a time to effectively advance a successful legislative agenda. Secondly, we have suggested a fixed term of Parliament to maximise transparency and allow parties an equal base leading up to elections. Thank you.
It's good to see that the only minor amendment was an increase to 4 years. Some say that from the inside, decisions always seem too tough, and from the outside they always seem too easy. And so I'm proud to say that we've solved 150 odd years of issues in 48 hours. And I'll now leave it to Will, who's going to talk you through some of the reflections from the last couple of days.
One of the highlights of the 2 days were the personal reflections of the speakers on constitutional issues. It was wonderful to hear the Honourable Jim McClay give an account of the constitutional crisis of 1984 directly from the coalface. What a fascinating time in politics that was. His comments provided a platform to think carefully about what aspects of the conventions of the Constitution should evolve and what might need to be done to preempt possible future scenarios. It demonstrated how our Constitution has developed so well on an ad hoc basis and contemplate whether it is time to provide a clearer Constitution written in one place, such as that we have been working on for the past 2 days. Honourable Peter Dunn inspired us with his vision of being bold. Being bold was a theme of many of the speakers, and there were others, such as Paul Goldsmith, who advocated a more conservative approach, to be careful about throwing away something that has arguably worked well. This inherent tension was a reminder of the need for greater public engagement in the process. The constitutional review needs to serve an educative purpose, and we need to listen carefully to the people to ensure the values are reflected in a constitution for the 21st century. It was a reminder that whilst there was a need to consider a fresh and new approach, that change must never be for change's sake, it must be considered carefully. As we worked within our groups on the wide-ranging constitutional issues, it quickly became apparent that reaching consensus was difficult. As debates merged into semantics, it became clear that working on such a big project in such a small time frame required not sweating the small stuff, allowing a general vibe to prevail, even where it was contrary to the thoughts of some individuals, myself included. The requirement of reaching consensus in initial groups and in the plenary and in final groups was problematic but an interesting experience that taught respect for others, communication involving speaking as well as listening, and finding common ground. At the same time, difficulty achieving consensus is very much a positive thing because diversity of opinion is good. Everyone comes from different backgrounds and everyone has something relevant to say. People bring unique insights and challenge your own ideas and beliefs. This is a lesson for how Parliament needs to listen to the people and take on board what all New Zealanders have to offer to the conversation. In terms of the substance of today, I believe the biggest difficulty that was faced was the crossover between different groups' materials. Clarity of what each group were to consider was a little fuzzy at times, with different interpretations available. There is a need in our constitutional review to be very clear on each question for public engagement and the implication for other parts of the Constitution. For example, I was in the legislation group, and there was difficulty knowing whether to include parliamentary supremacy or to leave that to the judiciary group. We also discussed what was to be entrenched within the legislation, and then the entrenchment group had different ideas. So liaising with other groups may have been better done earlier, but in dealing with such wide-ranging questions, with such overlapping principles, makes the whole thing difficult. I've been privileged to be part of this group and to talk to other young New Zealanders about exciting constitutional issues. We have been very well looked after, and I have been most impressed with the facilitators and those charged with making this such a rewarding experience.
Malo lava everybody, my name is Tele'a, and I'm also going to share a few reflections of the past couple of days. I was just sitting back and kind of looking at all the presentations before me, and please forgive me if mine isn't as slick. I have been surrounded by some incredibly inspiring young people, so forgive me if my words fail me. When I look at the group that's kind of assembled here in Wellington, like I said, there's some talented and really, really bright individuals here. And I think about some of the debates over the past couple of days, and I think that we've debated some really complex and hardcore things. You know, we've thought about sovereignty. We've thought about terms like kaitiakitanga and, you know, Indigenous peoples. What are First Peoples? What is a right? Who has rights? What is power? How should that be exercised? This is some hardcore stuff, and, you know, I can only be inspired by the attitude that everybody here has kind of engaged in that process. But I'm also reminded that standing here, being here over these past couple of days is an incredibly privileged position. And I think if we look at some of those debates about power and we look at this as an exercise in power, we have a corresponding responsibility to share this conversation with our families, with our communities. And I guess in some ways this is a rally cry for civic education, for, you know, all of those beautiful things, and kind of the use of innovative technology that dutifully reflects the way that we communicate our ideas, that we communicate feedback. And I must say that Wendy and her team has done an incredibly good job of trying to engage in multiple platforms, and that's a real tribute to your efforts. But she can't do that by herself, and that's probably one of the reflections I take away from this. It's up to all of us to share that, make this conversation accessible to as many people as we can. The second reflection, I guess, and my final reflection, you're glad to know, is kind of something that arose last night, and it was a question that Justice Williams posed to one of the facilitators, and it was, will this Constitution feed my kids? And for me, that was, you know, it resonated with me. It's like, what is all this about? You know, we're writing these very great, you know, kind of airy-fairy, in some ways, things on this piece of paper, and it'll look brilliant, but what is it about? Is this going to have some practical implications for our families and our communities? And I think that's a really important reflection to take away with all of us. And I guess if I could draw from, you know, some insight from Sir T. Paniora and his encouragement to look at the Constitution and understand it to be only as meaningful as the buy-in that people are willing to give it. And in that sense, only as meaningful as the culture that we create around this constitution, and that's how we get sustainable and meaningful change. So in that kind of vein, will you honour the principles of te tiriti o Waitangi? Will you encourage others to do the same? Will you encourage the growth of our reo? Will you respect our taonga? And will you leave a sustainable ecology for the rest of our generations? And will you teach your kids to do the same? Will we do that as a community? Because if we will, then the answer to whether or not this constitution will feed our kids is very simple. Yes, it will, and it will do much, much more. But perhaps that's just some food for thought. Kia ora.
I love it. Journey, constitution and reflection. I think that is an awesome product that's been showcased by the participants. Give them another round of applause for that. Let's see the people behind that product and that performance and that constitution. What I'm going to do, I'm going to call on the facilitators individually to come up and to invite and call up onto the stage and assemble on the left each of the people, each person from the group that they initially worked through on day one, the group that they've bonded to. So if I call on our first facilitator, Cowan Jones.
Kia ora. I'd like to invite to the stage Oscar Reggio, William Fussey, Charlotte Greenfield, Alex Ladyman, Ryan Smits-McLean, Julia White, and Tiana Morgan.
Can I now invite our next facilitator, Diane White, to the stage?
Kia ora. I'd like to invite to the stage Jessica Bush, Richard Leigh Hamilton, Jack Starrett Wright, Duran Moy, Pania Newton, Reed Fleming, and Sophie Pollock. Thanks so much.
Our next facilitator, Mihi Parini.
Can I please invite to the stage Louis Chambers, Lauren McGee, Andrew Neat, Stacey Riordan, Alice Osman, Diana Tam, and Yezdi Jal Kabari. Well done, guys.
Our next facilitator, Natalie Coates.
My name. Kia ora everybody. Can I please invite to the stage Dipti Manchandra, Zachary Kedgley Foot, Kirsty Allan, Jeremy Wilson, Tiaki Hana Grant Mackey, Tele'a Andrews, and Joshua Pietras. You guys are the best.
Our next facilitator, Edward Willis.
I said to a bunch of people who were here last night that the unwritten constitution is a beautiful thing. I'd just like to invite to the stage some people who have helped me see that the written constitution may also be a beautiful thing. Those people are Christian Silver, Helen O'Leary, Maithili Sreen, Emily, I can't do your surname, I'm really sorry, Rachel Jones, Morgan Watkins, and Hinano Perez. Thanks a lot, guys.
Now I invite to the stage our next facilitator, Marcelo Rodriguez Ferrer.
Kia ora koutou, let me invite to the stage Sarah Bailey, Sarah Scott. They're good. Both Sarahs were great. Jeremy Todd, Eli Parata King, Julia Whaipooti, Paula Gillen, and Kieran Stowers.
And finally, our last facilitator, Jess Birdsall-Day.
Okay, I'd like to invite to the stage Kieran Meredith, Ihapera Paniora, Rosa Polishek, Emma Gatti, Ruth Markham Short, Todd Bearclough, and Chris Nichols. You guys were actually the best.
What an inspiring bunch of young people you have before us that have produced an awesome product and now are going to stand in the world as youth and ambassadors for constitutionalism in New Zealand. Give them another round of applause. We have one other matter of ceremony to deal with, which is the blank canvas in our glass baton that was passed on to me at the outset on this workshop from Wendy McGuinness. And now I'm going to invite two of our participants, Jeremy and Sarah, to come forward to take out the blank canvas and to replace it with the text of their constitution.
Kia ora everyone, Wendy has asked me to give you all a wee sneak preview. I hope you all bought your binoculars. The Constitution is a beautiful thing. The design team has been working incredibly hard, and I've heard that it was a race. It was a race to get it finished on time, but it arrived. I'll give you a brief flick through. You might not be able to see it, but from far away it still looks amazing.
Don't worry about the details.
Yeah, it's all about the beautiful design. It looks lovely. That's what matters. The text is embodied with its beauty.
Oh, they can see it.
Okay. You can see it.
Do you want to... Can I just... We'll just invite the two participants to package up the baton, because this is a real treasure, and part of Wendy's foresight was to ensure that this product and this experience live beyond this event and this workshop. And now I'm going to invite Claudia Orange to come forward and to accept the baton and to hold the product that's been created over these 2 days on behalf of these participants, pass it over to Claudia so it can be showcased for the nation, and it's the ideas and thought can be taken forward by the peoples of New Zealand. So I invite Claudia Orange to come forward and accept the baton on behalf, or collect the baton on behalf of the peoples of New Zealand, and this gift from the participants of the workshop. Now, Claudia is going to make a few closing remarks and thanks on behalf of all of us, but before she does that, can I just invite all the participants to resume their seats so they can hear the wise words, the concluding words from Claudia. It sits right there.
Sits right there.
Just drop it down there.
Okay. Well, rangatira ma, e hoa ma, distinguished guests, rangatahi ma, Constitution warriors. Kia ora tātou katoa. It's a pretty special evening, as you've no doubt realised, as we do draw to the end of what has been a pretty hectic, frantic 2 days of thinking, debating and constructing ideas for a constitution. Those 50 young leaders you saw up here probably will forgive me if I tell you that they range in age from 16 to 28, and they have power. I tell you, I have been enormously impressed, and I think Philip Joseph here and I were privileged to be part of some of the discussions today, Philip, and really, you people are quite fantastic. I mean, you were urged to be ambitious, and there's no doubt about it. You have excelled yourselves. When you think of the huge range of possibilities, from written to unwritten constitutions or a mix of both, you've heard some of the terms that they became fluent in. Entrenchment, I wasn't even quite sure what entrenchment meant myself. I certainly wasn't quite true about the difference between entrenched and supreme law. Thanks, Philip, for clarifying me a bit more on that. And they considered the values that are really so important, the structure and the processes, and the changing demographics of our country, which are so significant in recent statistics too. And just that need for flexibility as against the vulnerability if we don't have some sort of constitutional provisions that might guard against the abuse of parliamentary sovereignty and the powers of it, and the certainty that needs to be given to the treaty so that we can stop having knee-jerk reactions. And finally, of course, how do we give legitimacy to a constitution? So all of those things were pretty important. And as Philip said to me towards the end of today, the more the talk went on, the higher the level of sophistication, until even he felt it had gone almost far enough. So the whole thing has been a pretty tall order. And I'd like to just turn to those of you 50 young leaders, because you've drawn on a huge range in the 2 days of written and unwritten knowledge of our past and present constitutional provisions. And I know too that you must have done quite a lot of homework before you came. And as Isaac Newton, one of the most influential scientists in history and famous for discovering the laws of gravity, said, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Well, you Rangatahi too, were able to see further, I believe, because you were indeed standing on the shoulders of giants who'd gone before you, the eminent parliamentary leaders of the past, and especially those of the present. Among them, Sir Ken Keith, Sir Geoffrey Palmer, and indeed Matthew Palmer. Nice to see you here tonight, Matthew. And not forgetting Philip Joseph, who was an important person that we were very fortunate enough to have, who can clarify a lot of the issues that came up in the workshops. And Rangatahi, you were not daunted by the wealth of writing about the Constitution, and nor were you diverted by the words of experts such as we are sometimes called. Instead, you bravely dared to propose new ways for the future, as we've heard. So, Rangatahi, I want you once again to applaud you. Let's. You've drafted a draft constitution in 2 days, and when challenged this morning, as you heard, you didn't shrink from heading into workshops again to bring it to near completion, not even with coffee sometimes. So I think it is true to say that the Constitution is really an indicative one, and it's an electronic Constitution. 5:10 tonight, I said to Wendy and to Dean, has it gone yet? It's gone yet? It's just about to go, and it did. And I remember Dean saying, and I saw the hands up over in the far corner here, that it actually had gone off to be printed. So I think it's true to say that you have achieved beyond our hopes the outcome desired when the workshops were planned, that they'd provide an ideal space to put minds and energies into addressing constitutional issues that have been signalled by government in the constitutional review. What you've done, though, is more than was asked for in the review, as you heard from John Burrows. You've actually pointed the way forward, I think, for New Zealand. And in the next year, you young leaders will be among those who engage in and lead constitutional review discussions. And it's in the next decades, indeed, that it's to you that we will look for the leadership that will take our country safely through the 21st century and indeed, of course, towards another new century with a New Zealand identity celebrated in our cultural diversity and securely expressed in our constitutional structures and processes, we hope. The workshops for you leaders, then, are not the end of the road, because you are, as Dean said, our ambassadors, our kai whakahaere. Each of you committed to 10 hours of voluntary work when you agreed to participate in this 2-day event. Dare I remind you? That's 500 hours, no less. It's a lot of time. And so you go out from here confident in your 2-day workshops and the thinking that's gone into them. You've taken time to become informed about the pathways of constitutional change. In a way, you take with you a kind of toolkit which you can draw on. And of course, I think the bonds that some of you might have formed in this time together have been important too, and you can draw on those and on each other. Filled with energy and zest that can move mountains, you have enormous influence and powers, potentially, that you could use in your various areas of the country that you're going back to. And those are indicated in the huge range that has been drawn on the maps that you can have a look at later. So use your 10 hours well with your lecturers, your teachers, your classmates, workmates, family, friends. Spread the word about the constitutional review questions and considerations that have exercised your creativity over these 2 days. Encourage people to grasp what is actually quite a unique opportunity. Encourage them to give their views and opinions on the sort of changes that could enhance our constitutional provisions and contribute to a better future for what we probably should call our national family of New Zealanders. What about my position and the help that I'm sure we're going to need in terms of the constitutional review, which will run through next year? I've taken the baton with some excitement and also a pretty keen awareness, especially after the 2 days, of the huge challenge of helping and contributing to enable a national conversation to take place. I'm actually greatly pleased that the head of Te Papa, Mike Houlihan, has agreed to Te Papa committing itself to playing its part. And I think it's well set up to do so, because in a way it's a bit like the National Marae, and we already have quite a number of forums on matters of importance. So we might just call on you to support us in our work as we bring new people on board for the many discussions that will occur over the next year. We're still planning them naturally, workshops, perhaps seminars, perhaps lectures, debates, panels, a range of them, which of course we've got to nut out yet. So as you go from here tonight, let your voices be heard in the four corners of our nation. continue to define and express a vision for our 21st century, because that's really what New Zealand needs, I believe. Dare to dream. The eminent scientist and nanotechnology person, Sir Paul Callaghan, said, just imagine this country should the members of the diaspora start to come home, not just because we make the best coffee in the world, and we do, but because we have the most beautiful, stimulating, exciting place to live and work. That's a dream worth having. So, rangatahi, let's grasp that dream, build its foundations, take it where you want to, run with it. E hoa mā ngā rangatahi, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawa nui. Be strong, be steadfast, go for it.